America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker with the Job Creators Network, and today we're joined by Daniel Kowalski. He is the director of the Herman Center for the Federal Budget at the Heritage Foundation. He's here to break down one of the most important budget fights happening in Washington right now, with Republicans looking to use reconciliation to tackle both homeland security funding and broader spending reforms. Daniel joins us to explain what's at stake for taxpayers, small businesses, and America's fiscal future. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Elaine. Happy to be here.
Well, let's just kind of take a step back because, we work with small business owners. They're not following all the sausage making every day in Washington like you are. And so let's take a step back and just talk about this congressional procedure just real quick and what the reconciliation process is and why it's so important.
Sure. Well, reconciliation is important because it allows a bill to be passed in the Senate with only 51 votes. So that takes the Democrats out of the equation. Typically, you need 60 votes to pass a bill in the Senate, but budget reconciliation will allow it to happen with 51. Now, it's important that budget reconciliation, it's spun off by a congressional budget resolution, and they get the expedited procedure because the bill is doing something to affect revenues or spending or to increase the debt limit. And so for those purposes, the Senate sets aside a 60-vote rule, and you can pass a bill with 51 votes, and that makes it incredibly important in the hyper-partisan environment we have now.
Exactly. And so what's kind of the lay of the land? What's passed? What are you hoping to still see pass? And where are we at now? Because I know there's been some movement since you had your recent op-ed in the Washington Post.
Yeah. In that op-ed, we were hoping that the Congress would do a broader reconciliation package, reconcile more than the Judiciary and Homeland Security committees. But that did not happen. The budget resolution that was passed is really focused on paying for the parts of DHS that Chuck Schumer and the Democrats prohibited from happening in the Senate. And so those bills are being worked on now. The Senate released draft legislation for each of those committees on Monday, spent $71 billion, $70 billion for ICE and CBP, and $1 billion for East Wing security for the president after the recent assassination attempt. And it's pretty much what you expected, a continuation for the Trump term of the deportation policies that were put in place last year.
So what's next steps then? Where do we go from here?
Well, that bill should probably get passed by June 1st, which is what the president asked for. There's 2 weeks till the congressional recess, and it'll probably get passed by then. And what we are pushing for at Heritage is for Congress to come back and do another reconciliation bill, the broader reconciliation bill that we wanted 2.0 to be. We would now like to see a more robust reconciliation 3.0 get passed between now and ideally the 4th of July. It would be a great thing on the anniversary of the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill to come back and do another reconciliation bill that could do things like potentially indexing capital gains. There's more waste, fraud, and abuse out there in the food stamps program, the SNAP program, as it's formally called. Take care of that. Do more health care reform. Take care of some Affordable Care Act eligibility criteria and unnecessary subsidies, help with affordability, get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. And our belief is that there's enough time for that to happen between now and the 4th of July if Congress put their back into it.
I agree with you. I certainly think there's time. And, you do mention in your op-ed in the Washington Post some really interesting low-hanging fruit that could be included. And I think that the American people would agree with and get behind in terms of the wasteful spending on Medicaid expansion and the food stamp program, of course. Even what's interesting to me, and I think a lot of everyday ordinary Americans don't realize, is the Federal Reserve reforms that you mentioned. That's really interesting. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So the Federal Reserve pays interest on deposits that banks make to the Federal Reserve. And that makes sense. It's a deposit. Now, it's something that for the first 95 years of the Federal Reserve's existence, they didn't do. It's something they started during the 2010-11 financial crisis. They started paying that. And what ends up happening is banks will park money at the Federal Reserve in order to earn risk-free interest from the federal government rather than putting that money to work in the economy. I mean, banks are supposed to make money by taking on risk, right? That is the whole point of what the banking system is supposed to be. You take on risk, you get reward, right? But they're able to get reward without the risk. And so maybe they're putting money in there that they would otherwise put to work in the economy. And the kicker of it all is foreign banks get between 40 and 50% of this money because their banking systems don't necessarily require them to put interest on deposits. They've got capital will find a way to make a return, and they can be lazy and they can put that capital to work, well, to work in quotes, I guess, at the Federal Reserve and earn interest that would otherwise be money rebated to the federal taxpayer. $100 billion a year. Ridiculous, right?
Well, especially when foreign countries don't pay it themselves. And they're coming here with their capital to get taxpayer dollars in interest payments. It's just another way that it feels like Americans continue to kind of shoulder everything for the rest of the world, and they don't get the same in return. I think that's frustrating for Americans. So that one really stood out to me. I think we've all heard about the nightmares in terms of Medicaid and Obamacare and the reforms that are needed there that we would love to see the Congress take up these reforms and get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse. But the Federal Reserve one was a new one that I really wanted you to highlight. So thank you for bringing that to attention. I think that's important as well. So lay it on the line. I need your crystal ball. Like who has the appetite to take on this fight? I know that Heritage does, and I know that you've been working hard with coalitions in DC and bringing together groups to come to consensus on ideas so that you can really make an impact in terms of this is what the American people want and bringing that voice there. But who has the appetite to actually listen on the Hill or in the White House?
Well, on the Hill, you certainly have Chairman Arrington of the House Budget Committee. He is a strong advocate for Budget Reconciliation 3.0, and they're working on some things. We've had some discussions with them about that and presented some of Heritage's work as well as the coalition work that you mentioned that we're doing. He's a strong advocate. Speaker Johnson also, I believe, is interested in a reconciliation bill, but he's got a tough job. He's got to assemble 218 votes. I think his heart is definitely into doing Reconciliation 3.0. I think he understands what we need to do there. I think some of the problem is really more in the Senate. There are Senate Republicans who will not vote for health care reforms. And there's money out there without health care, okay, and we should probably do that. But at the same time, if you know that you are losing money to abusive practices by hospitals who do things like charge different prices, whether a service is performed in a hospital or whether it's performed in an outpatient clinic, you charge two different prices for the same procedure. Why should we be paying for that again, right? Is that really harming the healthcare system? And that's the kind of thing that you could do in reconciliation, but they don't want to entertain any of that. I think they're trying to coast till election. Now, the countervailing side you might have in the Senate is Lindsey Graham would be very interested in moving the president's request for additional defense funds for fiscal year 2027 through reconciliation. And that's what the president asked for in his budget. He asked for $350 billion in reconciliation to really rebuild our capacity in the U.S. to build munitions, ships, things like that, the military industrial base. He's looking for $350 billion one-time money for that. So Senator Graham is very interested in that aspect of it. Whether there are enough conservatives in the Senate to band around saying, okay, we have to do that or some portion of that, but can't we do some of these common sense reforms, address affordability, address waste, fraud, and abuse that you and I talked about earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. How would some of these reforms, directly help Main Street small businesses who we represent? And what are the consequences, do you think, if a reconciliation bill 3.0 doesn't happen? Because, let's be honest. The Big Beautiful Bill, I think it was a big, beautiful bill. I still talk about it every day. I've got stories I'm sharing this week for Small Business Week. It's a dated bill. People already have their tax refunds. And so we can keep talking about all of these good things. And I do all the time. But the American people, I think, sometimes have a very short memory on good policy. And so I feel like we need something going into the midterms.
We do, and that's why we're trying to push for a July 4th, if you can get that. And if you can't get July 4th, you can still get a reconciliation bill before the August recess and then be able to talk about it for August, September, October. Look, for things like price transparency in healthcare, how does that help your members? Well, your members are footing the bill for the health care of their employees, many of them, and they don't have the right now to go in and see what the insurer is actually paying the doctor. Okay. So if you don't have any visibility into what your costs are, how are you going to be able to say, hey, wait, I think there's a better way to be able to get this, or I can get a deeper discount by going to somebody different, which is the type of thing you look at every day if you're trying to figure out your costs, right? But in healthcare, you can't do that. Well, one of the provisions that we're shopping here at Heritage would allow that to happen. That's going to make a big difference. The indexing gains, which I know your Job Creators Network is very interested in, sort of self-explanatory, right? If you've had Apple stock for 10 years and you wish to sell it in order to expand your business, some of that gain is real, but some of that gain is just the fact that you held it for 10 years during a period of high inflation. So that's another thing that benefits Main Street businesses. And even when you look at the waste, fraud, and abuse for things like SNAP or other federal programs, every dollar that the federal government doesn't have to borrow takes pressure off of interest rates, which is what your members are going to be paying when they're looking to get a loan to grow and expand their business. So it all matters.
I agree. And overall, we're seeing small business that I'm hearing small business is optimistic. We've got Jobs Day tomorrow coming out. And we had the surprise, the media calls it a surprise jobs number last month, which means now that the expectations are lower for this month, back to a more nominal number, say 60,000 jobs. They're seeing that as a slowdown if we actually hit expectations, because last month was such a surprise. And, this is the same group that, told us there's nothing to see here when inflation was 9% under the Biden administration. Move along now. There's nothing to see here, nothing to see here. And
transitory, right? That was the word.
It's transitory. And I've been arguing for months now, since we've been in this Iran conflict, this is transitory inflation driven specifically by the conflict because of the high oil prices,
Yes.
What's happening in Iran. And once that goes away, it is true. The prices are going to come down. And I think the stock market is reflecting that it understands that this is true transitory inflation too. I mean, What do you think about that?
Well, certainly. I mean, the stock market is forward-looking. And so it's looking to what the long-term potential of the U.S. economy is. And I think you shouldn't bet against the United States, ultimately, right? And we have brilliant minds and hard workers, and we will figure out a way to do something better and faster. It's just what Americans have done. It's what your membership does, right? And there's the ups and downs, and the pain that is coming from higher fuel prices right now to the American consumer. You can't discount that. It's real, right? They're feeling it. But yet there are other things that we can do here in government in Washington to try and ameliorate some of that. And it's all good policy, and it's all things that really Republicans can only do while they hold the House, the Senate, and the White House. And that's what they have right now. And I'll bring it back to that's why we really need to do another reconciliation bill between now and the November election, because we have these levers of power. We should use them, and we can do good things that will help pocketbook issues at a time when folks need it.
Well, what can our small business owners do to help encourage a reconciliation 3.0?
Well, your membership are the types of people who know members of Congress. Explain to them that, look, you need something. The one big beautiful bill was a long time ago. It's not addressing the issues that our employees, our neighbors are feeling right now. And we really need to do something to get at the growing expansive government and the large deficits that are kind of sapping our ability to get money to grow.
Absolutely.
Talk to your members.
Absolutely. Well, tell us where they can find out more information about what you're doing at Heritage.
Well, I think the best way to get it is our website, heritage.org. We have the op-eds that you cited out there, and Heritage has a wealth of information on what's going on. So, great resource.
Well, Daniel, thank you so much for your leadership on this issue and with the Reconciliation 3.0. I do hope that they can get something done by the 4th of July. I remember celebrating a lot last year when the big, beautiful bill passed on the 4th of July. So hopefully we can have that same kind of celebration this year, which will make America 250 even better.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. It was a pleasure talking with you today.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and to talk about Washington's budget decisions that have real consequences for taxpayers and job creators. This debate is going to help shape America's fiscal future for years to come. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to Main Street Matters, part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes drop every Wednesday and Friday. Be sure to subscribe to them at the salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts from. And we'll be back soon with another episode.